Howdy, everybody. Welcome to the Cowboys of the Osage podcast, being broadcast from the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum located in historic downtown Pawhuska, Oklahoma. It's Cody over here, and as always, I got my co-host with me, rodeo historian, Mr. Jimbo Snively himself. Hey, Jimbo, how's it going, and who do we got with us today?
Hey, Cody boy, it's a great day in Osage again, man. And we've got Cindy Mitchum, who's the daughter of John Mitchum, an American actor that played in over 80 feature films. He played in the Dirty Harry movies alongside Clint Eastwood. He played with John Wayne. He even played with Humphrey Bogart. I mean, how cool is that? And he played in over 800 TV episodes. I mean, just he was out there everywhere. And he's also the brother of Robert Mitchum. And we all know Robert Mitchum as a leading man in Hollywood for over 50 years. So I'm sure Cindy's got some great stories to tell being in that family for sure. And Cindy, welcome to the Cowboys of the Osage podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you.
Hey, Cindy. We're so happy to have you over here, me and Jimbo. You know, your dad and your uncle, were you guys originally from California, or how did they end up in Hollywood?
They were born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and their mother was a Norwegian immigrant, and my biological grandfather actually was killed in a tragic train accident before my dad was born. So they bounced back and forth. My great-grandfather was a Norwegian sea captain and had a house in Bridgeport and a farm in Delaware, and they would bounce back and forth as my grandmother needed them to be. And my aunt, my oldest aunt, Aunt Julie, when she was 12, joined a vaudeville dance team and started dancing across the country and married a sailor and ended up in Long Beach. So when the Depression hit, they lost the farm, and it was like the Beverly Hillbillies. There wasn't room for Dad and Uncle Bob in the car. So my grandmother gave them each $5 and a clean pair of socks and sent them on their way. And they hoboed from Delaware all the way to California by themselves.
And how old did you say they were?
14 and 16.
Well, that's a fine age for an adventure, Jimbo.
Kids grew up quicker back then, I think. I mean, you look at some of these kids now, 21 years old, and they're still kids, you know. And they had to grow up fast back then. The Depression.
They're still playing video games in their mom's basement. Some of them.
One of the well-known stories about Uncle Bob, which is actually true, is that he was on a Georgia chain gang because he was arrested for vagrancy in Georgia. And they put him in jail, and when he went to, remember, he was 14 years old, or 15 at that point, I think he was, and went before the judge, and the judge said, Uncle Bob asked him, "What am I here for, Your Honor?" And he said, "You robbed a shoe store." And Uncle Bob said, "Excuse me, what day did that alleged robbery take place?" And he said, "Friday." And he said, "You were housing me since Wednesday." So somebody in the courtroom laughed, and they sentenced Uncle Bob to a chain gang, which he escaped from. And he actually had gangrene in his leg and things, and my grandmother was able to heal it. The doctor wanted to amputate his leg, and my grandmother put poultices and did Norwegian things and saved his leg. But years and years later, he had a beautiful script, and he said, "I'll do it." And he said, "Where's it going to be filmed?" And they said, "In Georgia." And he said, "Pass, I can't go." And so the studio had to pay for his escaping from a chain gang, and fortunately they did, because it was Cape Fear.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
What a classic movie right there.
Right.
Cape Fear, Jimbo.
So they hoboed across the country.
They did. Dad hoboed 4 times before he was 16. And it was those images and that memory and seeing things that we could only dream about is what was the impetus for him to write America, Why I Love Her.
Did they have any ambitions to be in the movies at that time, or was that not on the radar then? They were just getting to California for...
They were just getting to California. Right. And once they got there, after being in Delaware and the Delaware cold and all of that, they fell in love with Long Beach and these studly young men having fun, just swimming, and all the girls. And my Aunt Julie, again, had joined the Long Beach Players Guild, and she told them that they needed to join, and they had no interest until she pointed out that there were 30 women and only one man. So Uncle Bob jumped in and said, okay.
Really?
You know what that meant, Jimbo.
Right.
They were having a dang good time in the Players Guild there.
Right.
So he wrote that song. He was quite the writer, your dad.
He was.
So that's where he came up with all the imagery and the...
was For America Why I Love Her, yeah. And before he did that album even, he wrote a poem that Lauren Green actually recorded. And Ken Curtis called him up and said, John, some people don't know, Ken had a beautiful, beautiful tenor voice and sang with the Sons of the Pioneers before Gunsmoke. And Ken said, they want me to do an album, but they want one piece to be asbestos. And I want you to write the piece. So Dad said, well, okay, what do you want me to write about, Ken? And he said, don't rightly know. So Dad said, okay, well, how come in the show you write a Jack, but called Ruth? He said, I don't rightly know that either. So Dad wrote a magnificent piece called Ode to a Mule that Festus first recorded, and on the album that I have, Jim Beaver, who was in Deadwood and Supernatural, recorded it for me.
Very good.
Well, I heard that today on the radio, and I hadn't heard that John Wayne poem in 20 or 30 years. And I heard it today going to Barnesville. And then a few hours later, Cody calls me and says, we got the daughter of the man that wrote that.
Hey, Cindy, would you mind if we listen to that poem real quick?
Please do.
Hey, we got the Robert Duvall version. Is that the one on the CD? The Robert Duvall version? Let's listen to the Robert Duvall version real quick.
America, America, God shed His grace on thee.
America, why I love her. You ask me why I love her. Give me time and I'll explain. Have you seen a Kansas sunset or an Arizona rain? Have you drifted on a bayou down Louisiana way? Have you seen the cold fog drifting over San Francisco Bay? Have you heard a Bob White calling in the Carolina pines or the bellow of a diesel in the Appalachian mines? Does the call of the Niagara thrill you when you hear her waters roar? Do you look with awe and wonder at her Massachusetts shore, where men who braved a hard new world first stepped on Plymouth's rock? Do you think of them when you stroll along a New York City dock? Have you seen a snowflake drifting in the Rockies way up high? Have you seen the sun come blazing down from a bright Nevada sky? Do you hail to the Columbia as she rushes to the sea, or bow your head at Gettysburg at our struggle to be free? Have you seen the mighty Tetons? Have you watched an eagle soar? Have you seen the Mississippi roll along Missouri's shore? Have you felt a chill at Michigan when on a winter's day her waters raged along the shore in a thunderous display? Does the word aloha make you warm? Do you stare in disbelief when you see the surf come roaring in at Waimea Reef? From Alaska's cold to the Everglades, from the Rio Grande to Maine, my heart cries out, my pulse runs fast at the might of her domain. You ask me why I love her. I've a million reasons why. My beautiful America beneath God's wide, wide sky.
To shining sea, shining America.
Well, anyway, that's a great song.
A great song.
That's a great poem.
And it took somebody that lived that and rode on a train, hoboed on the train to California to write something like that.
And that's the Sons of the Pioneers behind them.
Yeah.
That's a whole new perspective on that song when you think about him riding the old boxcar.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's not a political piece at all. It's the beauty of our country.
Sure.
It's just it's the whole country.
Yeah.
Man, that's a powerful. I've heard it. How many rodeos have you heard that at,
Right,
Jimbo?
right. But I hadn't heard it in so long, and then to have you call me today and tell me that the daughter of the man that wrote it was going, I mean, that's just...
It was meant to be.
Well, there's just so many things going on that we don't understand, and just maybe someday it'll make sense.
It's funny when Dad had a stroke and was being wheeled into the ICU unit, he was holding my hand, and those were the last words that he spoke. But if you listen to Wayne's version, he didn't say raged, he said rage. So Dad's going off to ICU, and he looks at me and goes, raged.
Well, let's get back to them early Hollywood days. He wrote that great poem, got it in his mind on his way across country, hoboing, on his way to California, didn't know what they were going to do. What was their plan when they got there? Just to be there? They got in the Long Beach Actors Guild, is that correct?
Well, Uncle Bob did, he was with the Long Beach Players Guild.
Okay.
And he was doing a play, and he was discovered, and that's how he did the first Hopalong Cassidy. Dad, on the other hand, was finishing high school, which he did, and he was actually walking down Hollywood Boulevard, and somebody stopped him and asked him if he was an actor, and Dad said no, and he said, do you want to be? And Dad said, how much does it pay? So the first film Dad ever did was a thing called The Prairie in 1947.
What was his part in that movie?
He was the son. It was about a family doing the wagon train thing, and Dad was the strapping young son that was helping his father get across the country. So he kind of a leading role in it.
His first rattle out of the box was a leading role.
Yeah, and he had no intention on doing it. Dad actually was training to be a singer, and he would hitchhike from Long Beach all the way into Topanga or Laurel Canyon and take opera lessons 3 times a week. And he would wash the windows of this gorgeous mansion, which is still standing, and it's directly across Laurel Canyon from Houdini's castle. And Dad would wash all those windows to pay for his opera lessons.
Houdini's castle. Mm-hmm. Houdini had a castle over there?
Yeah. And now it's a bed and breakfast.
Oh, wow. We'll have to go stay one of them nights there, Jimbo.
Have a party.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
You and Leslie in one room, me and Lauren in the other, and Cindy
we'll
and
be
her
there.
husband.
Yeah, we'll have a celebration.
We'll have a heck of a party in Houdini's castle. That'd be fun.
In 1949, I read where he was in a movie with Humphrey Bogart.
He was.
Did he ever mention Humphrey Bogart or anything?
Yeah, and it was funny. Dad was not one to collect things or keep things, but Dad did knock on any door with him, and he was a reporter. And all my childhood life, there was the bottom drawer in his bedroom dresser had the fedora and the camera that he used in that film, and he kept those. The only other thing he ever kept, he kept the mug that John Wayne gave him for Chisholm, and he kept his guitar from Riverboat. That's it.
That's all he kept from all the movies he made and television shows.
If I had not used all his scripts as coloring pages, I'd be wealthy.
Yep. You never think about that kind of stuff, though, when you're living it, usually, until later. You say, I wish we'd have saved that. I wish we'd have done that.
It's two different, maybe because of his upbringing and not being attached to physical things. The memories were more important to Dad,
and he
the
always
friendships.
had those, right.
As physical things never were a concern to him.
Sure.
Me and Jimbo, both of our dads and granddads were rodeo guys, and we went around with them growing up. And we knew all the other rodeo kids, and we knew the biggest rodeo guys, and they knew that was Cody and that was Jimbo running around there. Was it about the same way growing up in the movie life? Did you guys go with him a lot of times to film these, and did you know everybody else? And was it like one big family like the rodeo community is? Or?
Absolutely. And one of the things I always say that I had the better of the brother houses, because my house was full of love and laughter, and Dad was friends with the stars, but also with the Wranglers and with everybody. So it was a hodgepodge of people that were in my house all the time. And I told Jim Jury a few years ago, I said, Jim, I knew that you were famous, but I didn't realize to what extent you were famous, worldwide, and
Flies attacking her.
he started laughing. He said, "That's just because I was Uncle Jim to you," and it astounded me that Jim had fans around the world. It was kind of funny.
He's got his own Facebook page, Jim Drury something, and they're just fanatical fans.
His posse.
Yeah, posse. That's what it is.
His posse. And Jim was a wonderful guy. But yeah, we were all kids together, and if Dad went on location, we went with him, and it depended on what he was filming. Whether it was Bonanza or whatever, I could go with him, or if I was in school. But yeah, everybody was just all together.
We got some real pesky flies here in Oklahoma, Cindy.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm not sure that booger's going to leave you alone.
No, he likes the microphone. That's fine.
Here you go. You can swat him around with that if you
No,
need
that's
to.
okay. It'll make noise. I'll just watch him dance
well,
around.
it ain't going to bother any of our watchers if we
Who
gotta
are
swat
some of your
one.
dad's better friends that we would know?
Oh, geez. Forrest Tucker, because Dad did.
Yeah, F Troop.
Dad was on F Troop with Forrest, and they did some other things together, and they were dear friends. Jim Drury.
Yeah.
Well, when Dad passed away, Ernest Borgnine came up to me, and he said, "You have to do something special for your father." I said, "Well, okay, what?" And Ernie was actually standing with a guy named A.C. Lyles, who was the oldest producer at Paramount. So two pretty important people.
Right.
And I said, we'll put up a Facebook. And they said, "No, that's not good, a website. It's not good enough." So I said, "Ernie, what am I supposed to do?" And he said, "I'll tell you what you're going to do, kid. Your dad's friends are each going to pick their favorite poem and record it for you. And that's what we're going to," he said, "I'm going to be the first one to do it. That's what you're going to do." Okay. And my husband said, okay. Well, unbeknownst to us, I didn't reach out to anybody. We have 52 people on this CD of people that contacted me in the business that wanted to honor Dad. So there's Jim Drury, there's Robert Duvall, there's Jane Russell is on it, and Ann Rutherford, who was in Gone with the Wind, is on it. We have Will Hutchins, who was Sugarfoot. I mean, you name it, they're on there. David Huddleston, who was in Breakheart Pass with Ben and Dad. So 52 people came out and did this to honor Dad. That's
a great tribute.
Yeah.
For sure.
What a great movie. Breakheart Pass, Ben Johnson, Charles Bronson, John Mitchum, and a cast of others.
Right. Great movie.
I mean, gosh dang. That's some good watching right there.
You know, the TV's got so sorry anymore, you know, and we were all cooped up. I think everybody's picked up a new appreciation of these old Westerns and stuff. And I watch them all the time now, the way I didn't used to.
My daughters love them. They're 9 and 11, and they hoop and holler all through them all. And it's the funniest thing you've ever seen, actually. But I'll have to record my daughter's reaction watching old Westerns, and we'll have to put that up because it's so funny, their reactions to a lot of this stuff. And most of the storylines are very wholesome,
right,
family-oriented storylines.
Deliberately that way.
Yeah, and I don't mind my daughters watching, some of the stuff that goes on there. But, I mean, a guy's just defending himself, plain and simple, a lot of times.
There was a code of ethics, and they, even to the day of going to the film festivals with these guys, they lived and honored that code to the day they died. And they respected the characters that they played.
God, I'm sorry. That fly is bugging her like no other. It's bugging me, bugging her.
But
it goes from the microphone to the tip of her nose, back to the microphone to the tip of her nose.
But they lived that way, and they honored their character until the day they died. They were that true to it.
I know it. It's amazing. I've noticed that.
What about John Wayne? Did you ever wake up one morning and you hear someone in your living room and you walk out there and it's the Duke himself?
There's a funny story. I don't know if any of you remember the actor Greg Palmer. Greg was in Chisholm. And Greg was a big, huge guy. And he did, younger days he was like, this leading man. It was a toss between him and Gregory.
You said Greg Palmer?
Yeah, Greg Palmer, Gregg Palmer. And Greg did a lot of movies with Wayne, and he impersonated Wayne. And when they were doing the Wayne album, the phone rang, and I always had to be very polite and gracious on the phone because that was Dad's business.
Sure.
So I answered the phone. I'm in junior high, and I answer the phone, and I hear this, "Hello, is Mitch there?" And I went, "Oh, Greg, stop it." And there's this pregnant pause, and I'm not Grizzly, I'm really Duke. And Grizzly was Wayne's nickname for Greg. I just wanted to melt in the carpet. It was...
Yeah, I recognize
Oh,
him.
yeah.
Yeah, Greg had a deep voice. So that was kind of a funny thing. And then, again, when we were doing the album, I was dating my husband at that point, and Dad said, "Come on, kids, we got to go down to Newport Beach and see, I got to talk to Wayne. Come down with me." So we went down, and Steve and I were sitting in the car, and Dad was gone. And then it got past that point where we couldn't go and get anything cold to drink and come back, because if Dad came out, he'd be angry that we weren't there. So we kept sitting there. And finally, Dad and Wayne come out of the house, and Wayne looks at Dad and says, "Mitch, why didn't you tell me the kids were here?" And so my husband at that point was 19 years old, and this little, he's only 5'8", 5'9", and Wayne comes up to him and thrusts that big hand at him and goes, "Hi, I'm John Wayne." She was like, "Who?" I didn't catch the name.
John Wayne was a big guy, wasn't he?
He was. The only guy bigger than Dad was Dan Blocker, though.
Yeah. How big was your dad?
Dad had a 22-inch neck and a 52-inch waist. And his shoulder was thicker than my hand is long.
Yeah.
He was not anybody you wanted to mess with.
Yeah, he was heavier built than Robert, wasn't he? Your Uncle Bob.
Yeah. Uncle Bob was about an inch taller than Dad. Dad was just kind of like a bull coming at you.
Right.
In that movie's The Dirty Harry, he was always eating something, seemed like.
Yeah, he was his partner that was always eating.
Yep,
Right.
DiGiorgio.
Yep. Sure was.
What was his favorite snacks on that movie? I can't even remember. I just remember he was always eating.
Well, the famous scene is in the first one where Clint climbs over the chain link fence to Shea Stadium to go get the bad guy. And he looks at Dad, and Dad goes, "Too much linguine." And Dad had to walk around because they kindly knew that Dad couldn't climb a fence.
Yeah, I remember that.
What is old Clint Eastwood like? What kind of feller is he? Your dad seemed to work with Clint Eastwood quite a bit.
Dad
in his
actually
career.
knew him even before Rawhide. Clint was a house painter with a dear friend of Dad and Uncle Bob's, a guy named George Fargo. And if you look at a bunch of Clint's movies, there's George Fargo is always doing something in the credits. And so Dad knew him before as a friend, and then he did a lot of Rawhide with him, and then Dad did 6 films with him, including...
attacking it.
Yeah, I know. It's
ridiculous.
It likes me. He did Paint Your Wagon, and he did The Three Dirty Harrys, and he did High Plains Drifter and Outlaw Josie Wales with Clint.
I'd say that's Clint's most popular movies, besides maybe Good, Bad, and Ugly in there. That's
Right. Outlaw Josie Wales is an all-time great.
It was a great
As far as I'm
movie.
concerned.
High Plains Drifter, that was another pretty good
That
movie.
one had Dad's very favorite line in it, because Dad was the sheriff. And when he let the bad guys out, and they said, "When we got here, we had 2 good horses." And Dad said, "What do you think you've been eating the last 3 months?"
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood, Ben Johnson was a co-star in Clint Eastwood's very first Western. Hang 'em High, for sure.
Yeah. He had a part early in the movie, Ben did.
Yes, sir.
And then you never saw him again.
Yeah, he saved his life
Yep.
from hanging.
Yep.
So that's a first. That's a first.
Yep.
Clint Eastwood had Ben Johnson in his first major motion picture Western.
Yeah.
So
They were a very tight-knit group. LQ Jones is another one.
oh yeah.
And LQ's on the CD. And LQ's 93 now, doing really well.
Is he doing well?
He's doing very well. I spoke to his daughter. I've been trying to call him, and I couldn't get through to him. She said, "Well, he doesn't hear the phone so well." And I said, "Well, that's excusable at 93." But he's doing very well health-wise, other than that.
So your dad and Ben Johnson, they were pretty good friends?
They're dear, dear friends.
Well, I was looking through your CD here, which I already knew that he had wrote a poem about Ben Jonson, but it's on here twice.
It's on there. That's the only thing that's on there twice, and that's because Barry Corbin had his relationship with Ben, but my cousin Chris Mitchum was on Chisholm.
He was in quite a few movies himself, Chris Mitchum.
Mm-hmm. But Chris was on Chisholm, and that's where he had his first connection with Ben. And so Chris had a completely different connection with Ben, being a younger man. And so they both wanted to do it, and they both had different reasons, and no one on the CD I asked to do something, I would say whatever thing strikes your heart, whatever you're supposed to do. So to have the two of them want to do it, so we let them both honor him.
Hey, let's listen to the Barry Corbin version of it real quick, because I got it pulled up right here. Do you mind?
Absolutely not.
All right. This is great. Ben Jonson, the man.
Dad wrote it for Ben's funeral.
Wrote by John Mitchum. Read by Barry Corbin. Great poem.
Travel the world and you'd not find a man more gentle, caring, and kind than the man from Oklahoma way, who never had a cruel word to say about his fellow man. Though at times he'd strain to keep in check with a tighter rein his feelings as to those, of course, who'd act like a wild and untrained horse. For discipline and character go hand in hand. And nowhere in this great grand land did ever rider, now or before, stand above his peers like a Greek centaur. And now, as the empty saddle goes by, with the boots turned round and a tear in our eye, our hearts are touched by this humble man who revered his wife and gave children his hand, gave films a rich bounty for the whole world to see. The artist we honor left a great legacy of decency, courage, humor, and love, of devotion to country, beyond and above. He graces the heavens with true cowboy style. So for now, gentle Ben, it's adios for a while.
Wow, your dad was a great writer.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this CD collection they got for sale, they just got it out, Jimbo. Hot off the presses. It's got 26, how many tracks on here? At least
53.
53 original John Mitchum tracks. They're all read by his friends.
Isn't that something?
Where can everybody buy this at, Cindy? Besides our gift shop right here at the Ben Jonson Cowboy Museum. We'll send you one right here from the gift shop, but if we run out or anything, is there another place that people can look for them or anything?
The website is John Mitchum, no S, johnmitchumworld.com.
There you go, johnmitchumworld.com. If you don't order from the museum, I strongly consider you guys order it from johnmitchum.com. It's a great CD, over 50 of his original poems read by all his friends. It's great. It's very, very, very good. We're going to be having it in the museum playing quite a bit, Jimbo. Just over.
I have to say that this cowboy that's on the front is Rusty Richards.
Yes, ma'am.
Who you all probably know very well.
I don't know him that well, but
well, you should.
Yes, ma'am. Everybody should get acquainted with it. Who is he? Tell us who all he is. Rusty Richards. Yes, ma'am.
Rusty Richards, most people would know him as being the tenor for the Sons of the Pioneers for years and years. The most famous Cool Water, that beautiful clear water, that's Rusty Richards. He and Dad first became friends, 1957, 58. Rusty was doing a picture, and he was a stuntman at that point. He's a true working cowboy and one of the finest horsemen you will ever meet in your entire life. And so he's right up there with Ben as far as the kindness and the decency and the honest, integrity, and just a beautiful man. But again, one of the finest horsemen you'll ever meet.
Well, now we know who he is, Jimbo.
Yeah, I knew the name, but I honestly couldn't have told you what he did. That's great.
Yeah, he seems like a great one.
Yeah. Did your dad ever work with John Ford?
He did. I can't tell you off the top of my head what he did, but I know he did.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, there's a tribute to John Ford on the CD that a gentleman named Rob Ward recorded for me. Rob is a producer and has a video show in L.A. He records it at the Gene Autry Museum.
I'll be known. Cody, do you know who John Ford's son-in-law is?
Who is that, Jimbo?
King Curtis.
Really?
Yep.
Had no
Told
idea.
you there was a tight circle.
Well, everything's a pretty tight circle.
That's why he was in all those John Wayne and John Ford movies. He had his part. It wasn't always big, but he had a part there.
Oh, yeah. Well, no matter what circle you're in, it's a pretty small circle. Whether it's the Tiddlywink circle or the movie circle or the rodeo circle, it doesn't matter.
Right. It's a small world.
It's a small world, and every circle, it seems like, everyone has a friend in common, for sure.
Right.
For sure. And a lot of it's not any better people.
Well, I'd say rodeo people and a lot of the actors are good people.
Oh, yeah. It seems like a lot of the old school guys are pretty good.
The old school guys,
Regular folk.
yeah, they're. When Dad was doing so much again in the '60s, and people would stop him and say, "Don't I know you?" And he'd say, "Yeah, I'm your butcher."
But the actors, a lot of times, they made good friends with, the stuntmen, and like you said, the Wranglers and stuff,
Absolutely. And, the stuntmen and the Wranglers were the ones that saved their lives.
Right.
If
right.
you
made them look good, didn't they?
Well, no,
Too.
but not only that. If you didn't have a good rapport with the Wranglers, they'd give you a horse that could give you all kinds of trouble. And the same thing with the stuntmen.
Did he ever work with Good Chuck, Bad Chuck?
Sure did.
Yep.
And actually, in the book, Dad's got stories about Chuck.
Yep.
And I have a picture that Dean Smith and Bobby Hoy signed for me. And Dean was doubling Del Robertson, and Bobby Hoy, who is a smaller guy, was doubling my dad. And I said, "How'd you do that?" And he said, "A fat suit."
In the real early days, they had the actors doing a lot of the stunts. Did your dad have to do any stunts back in the days?
Absolutely, yeah. Did
he ever talk about it to you?
That's why he appreciated the stuntmen so much.
Did he ever tell you any of the stories about him doing any of the stunts?
One of the stories in the book there, in Breakheart Pass, he was in a fight scene with your friend there, and Dad was supposed to slap him, open hand slap him, and Bronson wouldn't move, so Dad pulled back. And Dad was a professional boxer on top of everything else, and so Dad took the director aside and said, "This isn't going to work. He's got to move, or else I could really hurt him." So then they had a little chat, and Bronson played fair, and it came out okay. It was a beautiful shot, but Dad could have just knocked him over tea kettle.
Bronson wouldn't know what hit him.
No, he wouldn't have.
Some of those old fight scenes and stuff got kind of rough at times. I've heard stories about them, where they didn't slip a punch when they should have or whatever,
I was telling Nancy Sue that for whatever reason, George Orison, who was an excellent horse stuntman, was lying on my living room floor one day, and I looked at him, and he had purple horse print all over his back. It's just part of a day's work.
Right. Yeah. They weren't making the big money either, that's what it was.
None of them were.
Yeah.
None of them were at that point. And that's, the actors of today don't really step back and realize what Dad and that generation did for them.
Right.
And up until 1964, they didn't even get residuals. So that's why a lot of the things aren't documented. That's why on IMDb there aren't so many things cataloged, because the unions didn't keep track, because there was no reason to. Now everything, somebody sneezes and they get paid for it. But
right.
It was a whole different ballgame then. And the hours that you worked. Uncle Bob was the first actor to make $1 million in a year, which sounds wonderful, but he made 27 films for Howard Hughes that year. At one point, he was making 3 films at the same time and was being helicoptered from one set to another.
Just working his tail off, weren't they?
Yeah, and no perks, no
Right.
dressing rooms, no.
Right. Yeah.
It was a different world, and like I said, and the rules and regulations, and there's a very famous story in the industry that Uncle Bob went on set, and there wasn't anything for anybody. There wasn't even any coffee, but he was given this ornate gift basket of goodies and food in his dressing room, and Uncle Bob looked around and walked off the set. And the next day, the same thing happened. And the third day, he came back in and he said, until we're all equal, I'm not staying on this set. So now, even today, you walk in and there's tables of donuts and coffee, and it's kind of called the Mitchum Rule.
That's cool.
Hey, I'm flipping through this book, The Henri Mitchum Boys, and this is the second time I flipped through this book, and I keep coming up on this same little deal. So I got to ask you about it because you got the first-hand information on it. This whole chapter is called Confrontation with Lee Marvin. So, you got to tell us about this confrontation with Lee Marvin.
Dad was doing Paint Your Wagon with him.
Because he was a fighter too, I mean, hard drinker, hard fighter.
He was a war hero,
Yeah, he
too,
was a war hero.
yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Sonny, but
That's fine.
trying to tell some folks who he is that might not remember.
Right.
But he was a
That
Paint Your
deep, gravelly
Wagon.
voice.
Oh, yeah. Once you see him, you won't forget him. You'll know who he
Yeah,
is.
Cat Ballou.
Yeah.
But Dad was doing Paint Your Wagon, and Dad was the Mormon who sold his wife to Lee Marvin in Paint Your Wagon. And the location was way, way out in the boonies. They actually built the town up in the mountains outside of Baker, Oregon. And so we got into town. I was on that location with Dad, and they wanted Dad to go out to set for whatever reason. And he could either go out on a stretch out, which took about 2 hours on a windy hairpin road to get, or they helicoptered you. So they put Dad in the helicopter and took him out there and was showing him around. And Lee Marvin looked up at Dad and in front of everybody said, "Oh, goody, goody, a Mitchum's here." And Dad just kind of held his breath because he knew if he interacted, he'd never work again. So he just kind of smiled, and Marvin kept going on and on and on. And finally he looked at Dad and said, "Are you going to put on your uniform and march around town so everybody will know you're an actor?" And Dad just looked at him and said, "Lee, what is your problem?" And the babysitter is what they were called. Is every star had kind of like a bodyguard, but babysitter, so that if they got into an unsavory situation, if somebody wanted to fight them in a bar or whatever, the babysitter would jump in, because if you're filming and you suddenly have a big scratch on your face or a broken nose, it doesn't quite match. So they have somebody that takes care of you, protects you. The babysitter came and took Dad aside and he said, "John, I have to apologize." And Dad said, "What on earth for?" And he said, "Well, I'm Marvin's babysitter." And I got so fed up with him the other night because he was just unbearable. I finally said, "Why can't you be more like Mitchum?" Said, "I just got off a show with Bob, and he could drink until 5 in the morning, get on set at 6, and never flub a line. You can't even find your..." So Marvin's a little upset about the Mitchums.
I guess they probably end up all working it out and
Eventually.
everybody getting along just fine, I'm sure.
But, yeah, Marvin wasn't quite on his toes like Uncle Bob was.
That would have been a good fight, though.
Lee Marvin wasn't as big as, they always made him out like a big tough guy in the movies, and he really wasn't that big. That'd have been a mismatch between your dad and Lee Marvin.
Dad could have plowed him down.
Right.
Dad, even after he had a stroke and was paralyzed on one side, he was sitting in a wheelchair, and Steve and I walked in, and my sister, who is older than I am, she's a half-sister, and she was egging him on. She was trying to get him to get up and do his exercises, which he had no interest in doing. And she was just going, egging him on to do it. And he looked at her and he said, "Come a little closer." And she was, I don't know why she was so stupid, but she leaned her face right towards Dad, and with his left two fingers, he went up and bopped her and sent her on her rear end. And she said, "You struck me, you struck me." And he said, "I didn't do any such thing." And then off she went. But even at 82 and 2 massive strokes, he could still be lightning quick.
What about them babysitters? Does anyone else come to mind that needed a babysitter quite often?
Several.
I know you can't kiss and tell all.
Well, nobody's watching this, so you go ahead.
But there's got to be someone with a famous raunchy past that you can say, "Hey, this guy needed the babysitter pretty bad."
Yeah, but there were some notorious ones that were had TV shows, Western TV shows, and I'll just leave it at that.
You got it. We can all use our imaginations.
You can figure out who was.
I don't know. I'm going Haas Cartwright. That guy had to live a good life out there.
Haas was a good guy. Haas didn't need a babysitter.
Did he know? Well, he was a big old boy.
You know, Cody, the odd thing about Haas, he was the most educated man on the whole Bonanza set. I mean, he had a master's and was really quite an intellectual, wasn't he? You know,
He was a teacher.
yeah, a teacher.
And he, as everyone knows, was from Texas, and he and Dad were very, very good friends. And Dan actually was doing a show in Huntsville prison, for their rodeo.
Yeah.
And as you know, what that rodeo was like, and it wasn't peaches and cream.
Well, back then they had the prisoners do all the rough sports. It was a lot like gladiator sports, really.
Right.
You went to go
And
see
the
a prisoner get hurt, and not do
The
good.
prisoners were hoping that they would get hurt bad enough to go to the hospital, but not die.
Yes,
because
so
then
they
they'd at least have
get some time
clean
off.
food. Yeah, that was a time when that prison had water barrels had rats floating in them and things. So they wanted to get a little vacation from
Prisons were
prison.
tough down in Texas.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, Dan was like the celebrity guest at the prison rodeo. And he said, "Come on, John, come with me." So Dad goes down there, and they're with the warden, and they're up on their little balcony, and there's a microphone, and all of a sudden a thunderstorm starts happening. And everybody's, "Oh, terrific." And then all of a sudden there's a commotion going on, and they look down, and one of the cowboys was being trampled in the chute before he got out. And they couldn't let the prisoners know because that could have caused a riot. So the warden, picture this, you got the guy that they're trying to get out before the prisoners know that their buddy just got killed, and thunder and lightning, and Dad standing there with a pole microphone, an outdoor banister. Mm-hmm. And so the warden comes up to Dad and goes, "Sing it, John. Do something funny. But don't touch the mic."
Yeah.
So Dad had written this little ditty that's in the book about beautiful, beautiful Huntsville, where the warden's peachy, keen, and swell. So Dad's singing this little song while they're getting the poor little prisoner out the door. So Dad did a few interesting things.
What about your neighborhood you grew up in? Did you have any famous neighbors? Was you play with their kids, or?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley.
Okay.
And I lived in a very normal San Fernando Valley kind of neighborhood. We had a pool. People were over swimming all the time. Like I said, my house was the fun house. It wasn't just, because of celebrities, but everybody that came over there was happy and had a good time. And so I went to school with various actors and musicians and things like that, and it was just kind of normal, like with you guys with going with the rodeo stars kid.
Oh yeah.
It just sort of you admire them, or but you don't. Like Jim Jury's sons went to school with me in high school, so it was just how it was. It wasn't anything that was mind-boggling.
What about Slim Pickens? Did you ever run across that old feller in your travels?
Actually, I have a very personal story about Slim. Dad and Slim were doing a celebrity golf tournament, which is hilarious in itself since Dad couldn't play golf. But they went off to do that, and that I was 17 years old, and that was the weekend that my mother really was making a final turn. And she had cancer, but she didn't let anybody know, so nobody knew how sick she really was. So Dad goes off to Arizona for this celebrity golf tournament, and he comes home and realizes that my mother needed to be in the hospital. So the paramedics come, and they're wheeling my mother out. And this is my memory of my poor mother. And I hear Slim going, "Well, John, I think I better go."
Yes.
He was quite a character.
He was.
Slim was, I guess.
He was. They were all, they all were. They were all just full of love.
Oh, yeah.
Unless one of them was crossed, and then they all stood together. They were the closest group of friends.
Really.
Well, there's some famous pictures of Slim in at Cow Palace in San Francisco.
When he
Getting
got
a
hit in
big
the-
old fist fight.
When he got hit in the mouth?
Yeah.
I've got that picture.
Do you get
Yeah.
what was the story behind that? I forgot, Jimbo.
He
It's,
had a little bull. This guy that hit him sold him a bull.
Okay.
And he was a little miniature bull, but he put some big horns on him, and he'd get out there with like a matador, and that was part of his act. Well, the bull died, and Slim never had paid the guy for him. And that guy finally met up with him there at the Cow Palace and said, "It's time for you to pay me for that bull." And he said, "Well, he died." He said, "Well, I don't care if he died or what, you know." And
took it.
yeah. And anyway, they went back in the back, and that guy knocked Slim colder than a cucumber.
it looked like a heck of a fight in the pictures.
But it was just a one punch.
Oh, is that all it was?
It was just one punch fight.
I can't believe they got that one punch back on camera way back then, because the punch shows Slim dying out. He's going.
Bill Linderman was sitting on the horse, and Buckshot Sarles, there was a cop trying to break it up, and you can see Buckshot Sarles kicking at the cop.
Yeah, let the boys fight it out.
Right. And Slim's already out.
Well, Slim should have paid the guy for it.
Yeah, he should have.
It ain't like he was already famous by this time, it seemed like. So he could afford to pay him. He decided he wasn't going to.
Yeah, he paid.
Yeah.
Because the bull died.
Yeah.
He was in Slim's possession. I've always wondered what the story is behind that famous.
But they became friends. I mean, they made up and did some work together and different things after that, you know, some publicity stuff over it, you know, even.
You know, my best friend from high school, we got in a fist fight or something way before we became friends, and then we became fast friends afterwards.
Right.
It's a lot easier to be friends on something like that than not friends sometimes.
Right.
For sure. Later in life, after Dirty Harry and a few of them, what did your dad become known for on his acting?
Well, the Wayne album came out in '73, and it sold 100,000 copies the first weekend it came out.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of was a thing that happened. After the Dirty Harry stuff, well, he continued and did a la Josie Wales and High Plain Drifter. He also did a thing called Jake Spanner, and he did that. It was Andy Fenady who was the writer and producer of that particular movie. Asked Dad to give Uncle Bob the script, and Uncle Bob wanted to do it, but Andy said, "Is there anything you want done?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd kind of like to have a part in there for my brother." So Andy was an old friend of Dad's, and Andy rewrote the script and made them actual brothers. It's the one and only time they played brothers on screen.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of a special thing. And then Dad was working, he wrote some scripts, and he embellished off of the album that he did with Dan Blocker, and I have 28 scripts and treatments of different folk songs that he wanted to get done. He felt that children needed to know the history of America through songs. He said it was a sled of knowledge, of blending the different countries together. So that's on my plate, that I have to get that produced and done, because I agree with him, it's a vital thing that people should know where we come from and how we all got here together.
What about this Dan Blocker album? John Mitchum, Dan Blocker. Is it still available, or is this an out-of-print copy that I have in my hand?
No, we have the CDs, and I'm incredibly proud of that. I think it's a magnificent album. Dad wrote all the narration again for the folk songs, and some of like the Erie Canal, which we all know, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and there's another one, the Paiute song is on there. So it's beautiful songs that Dad was intrigued. Why did that particular folk song stay and other folk songs died away? What happened? What made that one? What was going on in the community and in the world in general that made that song so special? And the Battle Hymn of the Republic, if you listen to that, as Nancy Sue said, it's actually the same melody that has gone through 3 transgressions to finally become what it became. And then there's the story of Abba Ouija and Steal Away and how that song came about. And so Dad wrote all the narration for Dan to recite, and Dad is singing all the songs, and he has the Ken Darby Choir behind him. And it was produced by RCA in 1964.
Is this available on johnmitchum.com also? Yeah. Dan Blocker, Haas, and John Mitchum. I can't wait to listen to this.
Uncle Bob wrote the liner notes on there, which are pretty spectacular.
You know, we're going to have this for sale in the museum, too, as soon as I get them bought from her. And
Dan Blocker actually bought that beautiful guitar for Dad.
That's a great guitar, and that's the guitar you still have?
No, I don't.
The one from the movie?
I have the guitar from Riverboat.
Oh, okay.
That one, Dad was doing a benefit show, and there were some Hawaiian dancers, and somebody stuck it under their grouse skirt and danced off the stage with it.
them pesky Hawaiian dancers, they get away with everything.
Gotta watch them.
You never knew what a grouse skirt was good for.
Yeah, who would know you could hide anything under a grass skirt?
Right. Dan Blocker, he seemed like a heck of a nice guy, and he died way too young, didn't he?
It was devastating when Dan died.
Yep.
He died from an aneurysm. He went in for a simple procedure, and they let him out of the hospital too soon. And before his wife could do anything about it, he passed away. And Dad was one of his pallbearers. But when I was younger, we'd go over to the Blockers almost every weekend because they were friends, but also because they were working on the album. And they had a color TV, so I was excited. I got to watch the Disney program on Sunday nights in color.
That's right.
That was an exciting thing.
That was a big deal when
you
color
were
TV
uptown
came
right
out.
then, wasn't you?
I had perks being John's daughter.
That's right.
But one of the type of things that these guys did is, I was raised an Episcopalian, and the minister who was from Louisiana came up to Dad, Father Latimer Garrett, and he said, "John, I really want to open up a boys' home, a non-denominational boys' home, but has nothing to do with the state. So there aren't any regulations or problems. I want it to be a home for them and for boys that have made a few mistakes or are unwanted by their parents, but they haven't fallen that far into the cracks yet that they should be in the system." And Dad said, "Okay, what do you need?" And he said, "Well, I imagine this." He said, "I found 50 acres out in Acton, California," which at that point you needed to pack a lunch to go out to Acton. Now it's like a hot spot. It's like connected to LA. And he said, I can have the 50 acres and all the houses on it for $5,000. So without thinking, Dad said, "You've got it." And then he went home and said, "What the heck did I just do?" So he called up Uncle Bob, and he said, "I need a check for $500. And Uncle Bob said, "What for?" He said, "Don't ask questions, just give me the check." Dad went to a place called Devonshire Downs, which was a huge rodeo fairgrounds in the middle of the San Fernando Valley at that point.
Have a racetrack around it?
Yep.
Okay.
And Dad gave him the $500 to rent Devonshire Downs. And Dad's doing this all on his own. Then he gets on the phone and he calls all of his friends. He calls Jim Jury. He calls Robert Fuller. He calls, everybody. He calls Dan Blocker. Everybody that had a top-rated show at that point, and every Western singer that Dad knew, he called them up and said, "Okay, we're putting on a show." Kind of like, let's go do a show. And the one of the people from the church was an engineer from NASA, so he was in charge of accounting. Because all these actors and musicians shouldn't be in charge of accounting. And so it was estimated that they, selling hot dogs and doing this and doing that they would make X amount of money. So these guys, all these top actors, Dan Blocker was head of the parade, Jim Drury, and I've got pictures of it. Somebody sent them to me on Facebook, actually put on this show, and it lasted all day and all night, and it had fireworks at the end. After all the accounting, they had $5,127.
Woo!
So Dad said, Father Garrett, buy some new clothes. So they did it, and Father bought the ranch, and he had that ranch for almost 30 years, helping boys that didn't have a place to go. But all those guys did it, and I have the picture of presenting. It was Dad and Fuller and Dan Blocker and somebody else. I don't remember. They were at the hospital bed of the man who was selling the property, and they were handing him the $5,000 check. So, yeah, they were a great group of guys.
Robert Fuller played on Laramie. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Laramie.
Oh, yeah. They have a comic book out, Laramie, from back in the day, and I had a few of them pass through the pawn shop, actually, through the years.
Yeah.
Bob Fuller told me that he killed Dad more than anybody else in the business.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, it's good they could remain friends, though.
Oh,
Well, Jimbo, there's a lot of similarities, and no matter what culture you're in, everybody's got good friends and acquaintances, and everybody knows everybody in your circle.
Absolutely.
It's sure good hearing some of these Hollywood stories that guys like us don't get to hear very often.
I know it. Yeah,
they're just common as dirt.
Yeah, and like Barry Corbin, was in here a few weeks ago, and he was just as average guy as anybody you'd want to meet at the rodeo or anywhere.
I know. He came and sat beside me at the roping the other day, just out of the blue.
And he was walking around the rope, and I don't even know if a lot of people even knew who he was. He just had the little hat on and cap. He wasn't in his cowboy hat, and he's not as recognizable in his little cap.
When we were doing the recordings, Jim Beaver, who's a remarkable actor, the guy said he was in Deadwood and he was in Supernatural, and he recognized Jim immediately. And he's the one who picked Ode to a Mule, which is one of the longest poems Dad wrote. And the man that was doing the recording, a wonderful guy named Ted Perlman, he called me up after the fact and he said, Cindy, I have a confession to make. And I said, what? He said, I saw that poem and I got stone cold. Because he was doing an audio tape, and the actress that was doing it kept flubbing it, and it kept getting longer and longer and longer, and she couldn't do it. And he said, I saw that poem and I just knew it was going to be a nightmare. He said, there was a knock on the door, and this very humble man in just a baseball cap and a plaid shirt stood there and said, hi, I'm Jim. And came in. He said, he did it in one take. I said, I'm only sending you prose. So when you hear Jim Beaver's version of Ode to a Mule, no, he did it in one take.
Well, he's a professional.
Yep, they're supposed to do it, aren't they?
That's how we couldn't do that today, though, Jim.
No.
I had to start once over.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could ride a horse in one take.
Well, I got to tell you, Cindy, you know what the most humbling way to make a living in the world is? Go try to support your family on the rodeo trail. It's very humbling. One day's feast, the next day's famine on the rodeo trail. So,
yep.
But we wouldn't have it any other way. I'm sure you guys wouldn't have it any other way either.
No, it's the same way being a character actor. It was the way it was, and that's the way it will always be. Because it builds that sense that you're never defeated. You can always accomplish something tomorrow if it didn't get done today.
Well, Jimbo, this has been fascinating.
It sure has. And the stories she's told, and if anybody knows anything about the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum, they know we're all about the history and any kind of Western type history, way of life, cowboys, rodeo, actors, whatever, and it was really great to hear some of those stories, and we appreciate it.
Oh, they all adored Ben beyond belief. I mean, as I said, in the poem. He never had an unkind word to say, even on set. They just adored him.
He was a great man. So was your dad, Cindy. So was your dad. You know, when we round one of these podcasts up, I usually ask for some personal advice from the person we're talking to. But this time, I'd like to ask you to give us some advice that your dad gave you. Some real good advice from when you were young, or maybe he gave it to everybody, I'm not sure, but I want to hear what John Mitchum would have to say to these young folks these days.
The one thing that I hold true is that both Dad and Uncle Bob, everybody began on the same level playing field. No matter what you did in life, no matter what religion you had, no matter what your color of skin were, everybody was on the same level playing field. It was your decency, honesty, and integrity that mattered. That's the most important thing in the world. And that's what made their determination of whether you were their friend or not.
That's stuff to live by right there, Jimbo.
Sure is. You don't need anything else. That's all you need right there.
Your word, your integrity, actions speak louder than words. How many times you hear that growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, with the Wayne album, Forrest Tucker actually had Dad go out on the Chisholm set and recite one of the poems that Dad wrote after he saw the American flag being burned on the front page of the LA Times. It was a piece called Why Are You Marching, Son? And Andrew Pine recorded it. You all know Andy from all the Westerns. And Tucker had Dad recite it to Wayne, and Wayne started to cry. And Tucker looked at him and said, if it means that much to you, do something about it. So Wayne stood up and said, I've never recorded anything in my life, but I need to do an album of your poetry. And they shook hands, and that's all it took.
And it was a remarkable album when they got done, too.
Right.
Over 100,000 copies the first week. That's something else.
Crazy.
For just a guy talking.
Right.
You know. It wouldn't happen to this day. I'm surprised it don't sell 100,000 albums every week, actually, Jimbo. To this day, it ought to.
It should.
Yes, sir.
Just week in and week out.
Well, the reason this came out, as I said, Ernie Borgnine told me that I can't be selfish and keep Dad's poetry in a drawer. He said the country deserves, and he said, no, the country needs to hear your father's words.
They do. And you can get the CD right here at the Ben Johnson Cowboy Museum or johnmitchum.com. You can get the whole library of John Mitchum stuff from the johnmitchum.com. We're going to be carrying quite a bit of it here at the museum. You'll be able to get the Dan Blocker John Mitchum one right here at the museum or johnmitchum.com, whichever you prefer. And Cindy, we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for the stories. And thanks for, coming and honoring the memory of your dad, and along with a lot of other people today.
It's started off as a tribute to Dad, but it's a tribute to everybody who contributed to it.
All right. It's a way of life. It's a way of life we don't want to get lost these days.
Absolutely. That's the main point. We can't forget these people. They're all magnificent.
They're the best. That was the greatest generation right there, one of them. One of our greatest generations for sure.
Salt of the earth.
That's right. All right, everybody. This has been Cowboys of the Osage podcast. We'll see everybody next Thursday. And thanks again, Cindy. It's been a real fun time.
It's been an honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.